there is truth. To say that there is no truth, we can't know truth, to me just seems like the lazy man's way out of not responding to the circumstances and challenges that arise, of not developing himself or herself toward greater ability. That the truth may be that I don't feel like building my house. I'm interested in other things. I would rather go fishing, and I'd rather go watch a beautiful sunset, whatever. The problem, of course, comes, especially for those living in northern climates, when you get to the end of the summer and the weather starts to turn cold. If you don't have a house to keep the heat in and the rain and snow out, it will be much more difficult to survive the winter. And so truth is one of those dynamics that you find virtually everywhere in the world that ideally guides us toward not only a greater chance of survival, but a greater quality of life. If the truth of a neighborhood, for example, is that the person who lives next door has a particular resource or a particular skill, the truth that comes out of that is that if you are able to maintain a good relationship with that person, their resources they don't become your own, but they may be available to you. And in the similar sort of way, if you can get them to value you enough to share the resources, the corresponding flip side of that is you valuing them enough that when they're in trouble, you share your resources. In farming and agrarian communities in the past, if there was not a official fire department in a particular small town, if someone's house caught on fire, everyone would grab whatever buckets they had, and they would all come running, and they'd form what they called a bucket brigade, where they're passing buckets of water trying to put out the fire. And everybody, without concern of, I don't have the time, or are they going to pay me, none of that was an issue. It was about, I'm here for you because I need you to be there for me. The truth is that we're interdependent, that there is some sense in which I'm dependent upon you and some sense in which you're dependent upon me. Biologists will tell us that in any ecosystem, and the ecological system of plants and animals and people sharing the same living space, that the fewer number of species you have, the more likely it is for those species to dwindle to the point of extinction. And the more abundance of species, the more different kinds you have, the more likely it is that through each thing contributing something different to the mix, that they will all be able to survive. It's an easy thing to forget in our modern times of wanting to believe in how independent we could be, because we don't see the other part of the exchange in many cases. A person who receives a check for a stock investment, for example, doesn't see that that check only happens because the company is being financially successful. And the company is only being financially successful because they're of workers and managers who have committed themselves to doing the best possible job on behalf of the company. And they are only successful because there are customers who have the resources necessary to purchase or hire those services and goods. You can't make $1 million selling pencils if nobody will buy the pencils. You're dependent upon all the customers who buy the pencils or whatever product it is you're selling. But this is where it's a complex truth that seeing how interconnected everything is, that's a characteristic. That's not the goal. That's not what's most important. It's not most important that everything is interconnected. What's most important is the life that is created by embracing that interconnection in the best possible way. This is where our various systems come in, and we have to be honest and embrace the truth of our systems, because systems also, like truth, are very contextual. In order for a system to work, certain circumstances have to be there, and if they're not, then the system won't work well. And of course, any system could be abused also. Again, if the circumstances or qualities that would make for an effective, enduring system are not available, then the system will more likely become oppressive. Capitalism, just as one example among many, is an economic system that has to do with capitalizing on money and has to do with how much money people have, but it's a system that's intended to support a society. The goal is not the survival of the system, and at whatever point capitalism no longer serves us, we as human beings need to be able to change the system to something that does meet the need. If we reverse the whole equation and create a world in which humans exist to serve capitalism, capitalism will wind up consuming the humans, because it wasn't intended to have that kind of relationship. People will be working for a living and pouring their lives into something until they die. And the characteristic of capitalism that makes this oppressive is that it has no way of saying what's enough, because it's kind of like saying how much circulation of the blood in your body is enough. Well, it has to be constant, and if it ever stops, you will die. In a similar sort of way, capitalism is like the circulation of blood in a society. It has to be constantly circulating in order to keep the body of society or the community going and to keep it healthy. Anytime it stops, some sort of problem sets in, just like having a blood clot in your body.